Okay, I want to bridge because we've talked about meaningful work and just how do I kind of identify that, and again within the context of HR, why that is meaningful work for a lot of people. It could be for others, and then the role of communication within that, which is what we've just been touching on. But there's a third piece, and I know that it's one that you and I are genuinely passionate about, which is community.
Mm-hmm.
And life is a team sport. Careers are team sports. You didn't last, not last, but you didn't stay at Levy forever, right? You
Right.
moved on, and we tend to not do the 40 years gold watch career anymore. So having a community is really important. And I guess I would just sort of ask a very broad question, to you to start it off with is, you know, tell us about why community is important to you, and then we'll double click on HR hot seat in a minute.
I would argue the most fascinating piece of this question for me is that I'm on the introverted side of things.
Mm,
So that's not to say that introverts don't do community or connection or communication. Those are three big misconceptions of introverts. But at one time, had you told me, Eric, you were going to be running a professional networking organization for HR professionals with thousands of members in 14 different licensed chapters around the country, I would have thought you'd have me confused with somebody else.
mm,
Had you told me that I was going to be, for a living, facilitating disc workshops, I would have thought you would have had me confused with somebody else. And I'm bringing this up now to go back to our initial point that meaningful work surfaces and makes itself known in ways that you might never expect. The work that I've chosen to do is not something that I could possibly have planned. It is something that
mm.
has evolved. When I realized I had to do more networking than I had been doing when I was happily employed, when I realized that I was going to do or need to do more networking than I had originally done, I started figuring out where people were coming together, and I went to those places and found that some of it felt to me transactional and superficial.
Mhm.
That yes, I was collecting business cards, I was coming home and didn't really, number one, know what to do with them, or two, care to do much because I hadn't really gotten to know anybody in a meaningful way.
Yes.
And so I decided, you know what, I would like to create the community that I would want to be a part of, where you can connect meaningfully with other people,
Mhm.
to bond over the common challenges that you face, the meaningful work that you would like to be doing or that you are doing, etc. And at first, it was sort of an act of faith, I suppose. I still wasn't convinced that there was as much value in community as I was hearing other people
Mhm.
say there was. It wasn't until I began to experience for myself what it was like to come together with others who were similarly wired, who had similar concerns and fears and challenges, that I realized how indispensable that community can ultimately be, in your journey of finding and pursuing meaningful work. I've created that community through the HR hot seat mastermind, but at the same time, I've also sought out that community in so many other places. And I hope I'm in a position now where I embrace it much more readily and build it much more readily than I did when I was sort of naive or ignorant to the value that community can truly bring.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a word in that I wanted to get to because it's a confusing word for a lot of people, which is network and networking,
Yeah.
right? Talk about something that's got some people feel is manipulative and using people for my own gain and things like that. What would you say to somebody that's like, networking's gross? First of all, to your point, I'm introverted. So meeting people like that just kind of cold or doesn't feel right. And how's if I'm just not using people?
Yeah. I as it so happens, I actually do a conference session called Network Like an Introvert. Valuable tips for all personality styles. One of the tips I shared during that session is that the people who are often least comfortable with or excited about networking, or least comfortable in the spotlight, are often the slowest to realize that they can choose where that spotlight is pointing. So
Mm,
one of the first tips that I share is, is step out of the spotlight, put somebody else in that spotlight. Bob, it's so good to meet you. Tell me about the work that you do, why you enjoy doing it. Don't tell me what you do. I'll learn about that. Why do you do the work that you do? If people were simply to open with that line, tell me why you do the work that you do, instead of what do you do, it would completely change the tenor of the conversation. So then someone like me who would prefer to stay out of the spotlight, I'm a little bit more analytical, I prefer to listen rather than speak at times. It checks all of those boxes and gives you a chance to feel as though, you are being highlighted, and you're being valued in some way for your background and your experience and some of the things that I'm asking you about.
Yeah. So, I ask you those 5 questions at the beginning, and we call those Rock's Fab 5 in honor of my friend Rock Robinson, who taught them to me. Because when you're meeting people, like finding some common ground, like I want to learn about you, to your point, like, why do you do what you do? But even something, I mean, as so fundamental as, where were you born and raised? I didn't know you went to school in Ohio. Really? I live in Ohio. And this is genuine. I didn't know about all your music stuff. I want to connect you with Joey after this call, because Joey also is a singer. And there's another guy I'd like to introduce you to, who's also a professional singer and does some very cool stuff.
Fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's finding things that are in common. But what's also implied in that, the first LinkedIn article I ever wrote was called "The Most Powerful Question You Can Ask," which was on the back of a networking meeting that I had where somebody wanted to meet me, and they were extremely uncomfortable coming to me, and they had a high level of shame because they were in job transition and felt like they were bothering me, and so felt like a net taker in a call like that. And what I learned coming out of that was, like, the goal should be, I'd love to find a way to help you, Eric. Like, if there's something that I can learn as we get to know each other, that I can be of help to you, because I think you would love meeting Joey, because you guys have something really in common that I think you guys would love about each other, or whatever it might be. That when we go into networking with a spirit of, I want to find how to make deposits in this relationship, not just make withdrawals. Now, I also believe, and I think this is definitely true, sowing and reaping is a real thing. When we sow into relationships, then a natural outcome of it is we will also reap on another day, right? Because when you sow, it bears fruit. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just, some days, we're the fruit giver, some days we're the fruit getter. And it's okay. That's a relationship. That's a mutual relationship where one person isn't always, giving, and it's the philanthropist or the benefactor, and somebody's always the receiver. And, it's just net taking from the relationship. That's when it's, goes through balance like that. That's healthy, I think. And, the doubling up from that is being in community